With each and every Magic release, there is the potential, no matter how remote, that some new card will synergize with old reserve list cards. On today's video, we'll be covering Knights and Soldiers and what cards on the reserve list might be added to your new Commander deck. Hi everyone and welcome back. MTG Moxman here. Thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel today for another card watch video. In this case, some reserve list cards you should be watching, but that doesn't mean that you should be buying them. And let me explain. Whenever a new set gets released, whenever we have new cards coming into the fold, a lot of players will look at old reserve list cards and think, these are going to work now. They are perfect. It is going to be awesome. And a lot of speculators dive in and start buying these cards up. But unfortunately, a lot of reserve list cards just do not hold up to today's standard of card. When you think of tribal theme decks, and today we're going to cover Soldiers as well as Knights, so the video will take a few extra minutes. I want to show you and explain my reasoning behind this. Not every card will fit in, and of course they don't fit in because they're just underpowered by today's standards. Some can be a nice sidebar card or have a particular use against a particular deck. But there are so many ways that Wizards of the Coast has been exposing new tribal selections, such as Knights and Soldiers, over the last little while, that it's giving players the opportunity to branch into new cards, new deck construction, which they may not have thought possible or had the opportunity to before. And if you're a person who loves reserve list collecting, that doesn't mean that you can't add some of these cards in. I just don't think they serve a very valid purpose yet, and I'll explain, of course, as we go through the video. Let me show you the first card today, and most people will recognize this as Archangel Elspeth, March of the Machine. Whenever we get a new card, people start diving into this stuff and getting very excited, and I can understand that. I can agree with it. It's an amazing card to look at. The artwork is breathtaking, the card has a lower casting cost, and I still don't think you should buy it right now. I think you should wait. When we look at this card, as a pre-release priced card at almost 40 bucks, this card is going to fall in price. And even though singles are kind of ruling the market space right now, players don't really do mass box openings with the current price levels and the overprinting, this card is going to fall in price. It is 2 white, 2 generic. Legendary Planeswalker Elspeth, and yeah, that artwork is just, I love looking at this stuff, guys. +1, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. And that's where players start going, it creates soldiers. We can dive in here and make an amazing commander deck. I get the enthusiasm, I'm with you. -2, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types and gains flying. Very nice, easy to use. -6, return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's the interesting soldier mechanic, as many soldiers cost 3 or less mana. This makes it a very appealing card for somebody trying to build that type of deck. I get it. Now the first card a lot of players will look at will be Khel'Joran Outpost, and that's from Alliances. Now compared to Elspeth at 40 bucks, Khel'Joran Outpost will seem like a bargain. It's reserve list, it's from Alliances, and it's only $15 on TCG Player. That's right, that's how inexpensive this card is. It's a land. When Khel'Joran Outpost comes into play, sacrifice a plains or bury the outpost, okay? It can tap to add 1 white to your mana pool, but it's that secondary power. 1 white, 1 other, put a soldier token into play. Treat this as a 1/1 white creature. Wizards loves trying to replicate these cards. A lot of players immediately think of the Throne of Eldraine land, and that is Castle Ardenvale. And the lands from Throne of Eldraine, they were kind of like copycats of all the ones from Alliances. They have similar abilities, but they cost more mana. But the real kicker on this one is it creates white human creature tokens, not soldiers. So it's not a card you're going to include, and it doesn't have as low a casting cost, of course, as the Outpost. The Outpost is just a superior card in so many ways. And again, at the price point, I can see why players would want to buy it. And I can agree with that. This is a very inexpensive card. I can see why players would pay for it and keep it in their collections and never take it out of their deck if they're building a type of soldier deck. But let's take a look at some of the actual soldier cards on the reserve list and which ones you might want to include. The first soldier I'm going to share with you is Rashida Scalebane. 2 white, 3 generic for a 3/4. It says Summon Legend, but when you take a closer look at the errata and stuff, guys, it does say Human Soldier, so you can, of course, count this as a soldier inside your deck. The old cards that say Legend, you've always got to look them up to see what they fall under. But it's this card's tapping ability, which some players might find interesting. Bury target attacking or blocking dragon. Gain an amount of life equal to that dragon's power. So with all these upcoming dragons, all these giant beasts we've seen in the last couple of years, a simple tapping effect eliminates that problem and you gain life. That is a card that can't be ignored, and for a simple $1.50 to $2 on TCG Player, you can see why some players have started purchasing this card. Kaljoran Outpost has had a few sales in the last week. This card has had dozens of sales, and that's because players get caught up in that moment saying, I think this is going to be a good card. I think it's going to work. It's an aside card. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's not the worst, because there are synergy cards that can work with these. Allow me to explain. With Rashida's high casting cost, you need to find a way to get these cards out easier. And the Ballyrush Baronet at 1 white, 1 generic for a 2/1, but Kithkin spells and soldier spells cost 1 less to cast, makes her now a 4 casting cost for a 3/4. Synergy inside your commander deck is so important, and reserve list cards generally have higher casting costs, so if you're going to use them, it is something to consider. Now, for other soldiers out there that you may be interested in, the field for the reserve list becomes quite limited. Take a look at these cards. The first card I'm going to share with you is Icatian Skirmishers, and that's a summon soldier. It's a 1/1, but it costs 4, so again, you're going to need ways of synergizing and getting cards out a little bit quicker, because this card does have a unique secondary power. It has banding, it has first strike, which in itself is not that great at that casting cost, but the subtext, all creatures that band with skirmishers to attack gain first strike until end of turn, which means any soldiers that band together to attack, this guy is going to become a linchpin in your ability to mitigate damage as well as dish it out. This is not a bad card, and the good news is it's going to cost you 30 cents. That's right, cards like this on the reserve list from Fallen Empires are so cheap, it literally is going to cost you 30 cents on TCG Player. You may not have it in the deck, but it's not a bad card to buy and stick around with. And the last one I want to share with you is the Icatian Lieutenant. Now, at 2 white, this is not the worst card for its casting cost. It is a 1/2, it does say Summon Soldier, and it has the nice passive ability there. You can say, hey, do I feel like pumping this up this turn or not? You don't have to tie up mana, but if you can, it says target soldier gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And mixing with some of these other cards on the list, it can be a unique ability. But each of these 2 cards are not amazing synergy cards. They're not cards that are going to drive a deck forward when there are so many different options available with better soldier cards out there to be connecting in. These cards are kind of aside. They might be something janky you want to try out, but the good news is they cost very little money to put this stuff together, and that's the great news. A lot of these lower end reserve list cards do not cost you a lot of money, with the most expensive card being the Outpost at $15 and the other cards being $2 all the way down to 30 cents. Each of these options are affordable, and they're all from the reserve list. They're not being reprinted anytime soon. But a few of those cards, like the Icatian Lieutenant and the Skirmishers, are not going to do much for your deck, generally speaking, unless you're just trying to have a little bit of fun with it. When you take a look at Scalesbane, that is going to be a card you might want to face off against if you're facing a dragon deck, or if you just want to have a few options available in case you're coming across dragons. Now we can take a look at the second half of this video, and that's going to be Knights, because we got some new stuff coming out of March of the Machines that has a lot of players talking. When we're taking a look at Knights, here's the name that changed things around, and that is Sidar. The card I'm showing you right now is the reserve list version of him from back in Mirage. This card is 1 white, 3 generic for a 2/2 with flanking. It is a legendary creature, human knight. The flanking ability, which is an old mechanic, says whenever a creature without flanking blocks this creature, the blocking creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Which means if you block with 5 different creatures, they all get -1/-1. It's kind of a brutal power when you started using all kinds of things to pump this guy up. Whenever Sidar attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. A very interesting card, but again, look at the casting cost. Doesn't fit very well with a lot of commander decks nowadays, but they reimagined him for March of the Machines, and we got Sidar. Alright, here we have a creature that is a legendary creature, human knight. It's a 4/3 for 1 black, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 generic. It has Eminence. Whenever you attack with 1 or more knights, if Sidar Jabari is in the command zone or on the battlefield, draw a card and then discard a card. He has flying in first strike, and it says, whenever Sidar deals combat damage to a player, return target knight creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's very interesting. And it started getting players looking at reserve list cards that can fit with this card, that will synergize. And that is not an easy thing to do because the knights that are out there for the reserve list are not that many. And here's one of the examples. You have the Crusader. Again, this is from Visions, and this is not the worst card, by the way. It can be put into a deck, and it has an interesting secondary ability. The Crusader here is only going to cost you about $4. Okay, Canadian, which means like what, $2.50 US. 2 white, 1 generic. It's a 2/2 with flanking, which is kind of an interesting thing to use in a commander deck. But it's the secondary ability of 1 white, 1 generic, redirect 1 damage from the Crusader to target creature or player, which means you can kind of redirect where your damage is going. A very interesting mechanic. And it doesn't really end there because you have another choice, which is the Knights of Thorn from the Dark. Now this is a heavy casting cost card. 1 white, 3 generic for a 2/2, but it does have protection from red and it has banding. And that kind of thing built together inside of a commander deck can be a lethal combination. If you have a way of redirecting damage like the Crusader, you can keep a lot of your cards alive. And when it comes to knights that are on the reserve list, the weakness really does show through. Although the 2 cards I showed you will work and they can be lots of fun, they're the best options you have available within the color wheelhouse of Sidar. Along with the original Sidar that's from Mirage. Even that though, that's an expensive casting cost. You gotta find ways to synergize it. And there are many more modern cards that will fit better, like the Circle of Loyalty, as well as say the Knight's Charge. Both of these cards fit very well with Knights. They fit in the wheelhouse of the color. They're just good options to have around. Not to mention something like the Cavalier here, you know, Knights you control have double strike. There are more modern synergies that work so much better with Sidar that you're going to be looking at more options coming forward than looking back. The Knights of Thorn is a great card if you want to add banding. The Crusader if you want to redirect damage or add a little bit of flanking to your deck. There's also that Banner of Flanking that's not reserve list, but it's from, I think that's from Weatherlight. Those are options available to you. It's like 50 cents. The best part is these aren't expensive. None of the cards I showed you today are going to break the bank if you want to add a little bit of reserve list flavor. But for speculators out there trying to dive in on these cards, this is not the time to be buying them just to spec on them. There's not enough usage being applied to these cards to make them actually go up in value. So I would keep your powder dry, but for a player who wants to add them in for some spice or the unexpected, it's definitely a card you can add in and have a little bit of fun with. So here are some great options, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video today. I look forward to seeing your comments in the comment section. And of course, we're on a Friday right now. By the time you're watching this video, probably, don't forget, we have the Hot 10 videos this weekend. We have the Modern list on Saturday and the Reserve list on Sunday. And there's a lot to get covered this week because the sales have been phenomenal. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Have a fabulous weekend. And thanks again for allowing me to entertain you each and every day on the channel. Guys, have a great day today. Patrons are the lifeblood of my channel. They allow for this content creation each and every day. To all my regular viewers out there, guys, thanks for watching, but to the patrons, thanks for being here for me. Thanks again. I'll see you tomorrow. I know, right? You're at the end of the video, you're like, hey, that's not how I thought it was going to go. I thought you were going to pump up those guys. They're amazing. They are fun. But with all the more modern cards out there, not all of them fit. But you can throw people for a loop when you add in something like protection from red. You add in like something that has like an island walk or land walk ability, or banding when done correctly. And that Crusader redirecting damage can be a real mess up if you have a way of keeping them alive. I love these cards. They're great. And the best part is all these reserve list options are very inexpensive, guys. That's the best part. They're a little bit pricey on some, but there's ways of synergizing like the Incubator to lower the casting costs. And the Incubator became very inexpensive with the reprints, so it kind of fits in nicely. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here, man. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And don't forget, in the comments section, we got to put Sarah. I'm sorry. Elspeth reminds me of Sarah. I'm putting Sarah again. I like Sarah. They got to bring her back. Time travel her back in, man.